The bullies tried to stab the quiet new kid. They had no idea he was a black belt. Marcus Rivera stood at the entrance of Westfield High School, his backpack slung over one shoulder, trying to blend into the morning crowd of students streaming through the glass doors. At 16, he was average height but lean to the point of looking fragile, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and brown eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. His clothes were simple and clean, but not trendy, jeans that fit well enough, and a plain grey hoodie that had seen better days. Everything about his appearance screamed easy target to anyone looking for someone to pick on. This was his third day at Westfield, and Marcus already knew he hated it. His family had moved here from across the country when his father got a job transfer, ripping him away from everything familiar just as his junior year was starting. The hallways felt like a maze of hostile territory, filled with established groups and social hierarchies that had been forming since these kids were in elementary school together. Marcus had no intention of trying to break into any of those circles. He just wanted to keep his head down, get through the remaining 2 years, and graduate without incident. What none of these students knew, what nobody at Westfield High School suspected, was that Marcus had been training in mixed martial arts since he was 8 years old. His father, a former military man, had enrolled him in classes after Marcus came home with a black eye from bullies at his old elementary school. Over the years, Marcus had earned his black belt in karate, become proficient in Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and developed lightning-fast reflexes that could put most adult fighters on their backs. But his parents had always taught him that fighting was a last resort, to be used only when there was no other choice and someone was in real danger. Violence should only meet violence when lives are at risk, his father had drilled into him countless times. Your skills are for protection, not for showing off or getting revenge. So when Marcus first encountered Derek Thompson and his crew on his second day at school, he did what he'd been taught to do. He walked away. Derek was everything Marcus wasn't. Tall, broad-shouldered, with bleached blonde hair, and the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never having his dominance seriously challenged. He was a senior, captain of the wrestling team, and had been the undisputed king of Westfield's social hierarchy since middle school. His two main followers were Brad Michaels, a stocky redhead with arms like tree trunks from hours in the weight room, and Tyler Hayes, a lanky kid with a cruel smile who seemed to get genuine pleasure from watching others suffer. The first encounter happened in the hallway outside the chemistry lab. Marcus was walking to his locker when Derek deliberately stepped into his path, forcing him to stop short. "Watch where you're going, new kid," Derek said, even though Marcus hadn't been anywhere near him. Marcus looked up at Derek's face, noting the calculating gleam in his eyes, the way Brad and Tyler flanked him like bodyguards. "Sorry," Marcus said quietly, and stepped around them. He heard Tyler's high-pitched laugh behind him. "Sorry?" Tyler mimicked in a mocking voice. "Did you hear that, Derek? He's sorry." Derek's voice carried down the hallway. "Yeah, I heard. Kid's got no spine." Marcus kept walking, his hands clenched into fists inside his hoodie pocket. He could have easily taken all three of them, probably without breaking a sweat. His muscle memory was trained to react to aggressive postures like theirs. Derek's slightly forward lean, Brad's clenched fists. Tyler's weight shifted onto the balls of his feet. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around and show them exactly what they were dealing with. Instead, he forced himself to think of his father's voice. A real warrior knows when not to fight. The second encounter came the next day in the cafeteria. Marcus had chosen a table in the corner, hoping to eat his lunch in peace while reading a book for English class. The cafeteria was typical of every high school. Long tables filled with different social groups, the popular kids near the windows, the athletes claiming the center tables, various smaller cliques scattered throughout. The noise level was constant, conversations, laughter, the scraping of chairs and clattering of trays. Marcus was halfway through his sandwich when a shadow fell across his table. He looked up to see Derek standing there with his lunch tray, Brad and Tyler behind him as always. "This is our table," Derek announced, loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. Marcus glanced around. The cafeteria was maybe half full, with plenty of empty tables available. This wasn't about seating. This was about establishing dominance, making it clear to everyone watching that the new kid was at the bottom of the food chain. "I don't see your name on it," Marcus said calmly, not looking up from his book. Derek's face darkened. "What did you say to me?" The conversations at nearby tables began to quiet as students sensed drama brewing. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes turning toward them, some curious, others already pulling out phones to record whatever was about to happen. He closed his book and looked up at Derek, keeping his expression neutral. "I said I don't see your name on the table, but if you want it, I can move." Derek's jaw clenched. He'd clearly been hoping for more of a confrontation, something that would justify escalating the situation. Marcus's reasonable response left him looking like the aggressor if he pushed further. "Damn right you'll move," Derek muttered, but there was frustration in his voice. Marcus packed up his things slowly, deliberately, while Derek and his friends took over the table. As he walked away, he heard Tyler say, "What a loser. Didn't even try to stand up for himself." "Give it time," Derek replied, and there was something dark in his tone that made Marcus glance back. Derek was watching him leave with the intensity of a predator selecting prey. Give it time. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated gradually. Derek and his crew seemed to have made tormenting Marcus their new hobby. They would accidentally bump into him in the hallways, hard enough to make him stumble and drop his books. In gym class, when they played basketball, Derek would lose control of the ball and send it flying into Marcus's face or stomach. During partner exercises, Brad would always seem to grip Marcus's arm just a little too hard during stretches, leaving finger-shaped bruises. The worst part wasn't the physical harassment. Marcus had endured worse during sparring sessions. It was the constant psychological pressure, the way they made sure he never felt safe or relaxed. They would appear around corners when he least expected it, follow him to his locker, make loud comments about weakling transfer students whenever he was within earshot. Marcus found himself taking longer routes to classes to avoid certain hallways. He started eating lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. He kept his head down and spoke to no one unless absolutely necessary. Every day felt like walking through a minefield, never knowing when the next humiliation would come. Other students noticed, of course. Some looked sympathetic but kept their distance. Getting involved would just make them targets too. Others seemed to find the whole thing entertaining, enjoying the daily drama of watching someone else get picked on. A few looked disgusted by Derek's behavior, but nobody spoke up. Nobody intervened. The teachers were worse than useless. When Marcus's books got knocked out of his hands in the hallway, Mrs. Peterson just told everyone to be more careful without addressing who had actually done the knocking. When Derek made loud comments about pathetic new kids during Mr. Walsh's history class, the teacher just said, "Keep it down," without actually addressing the harassment. It was as if they had collectively decided that teenage cruelty was just a fact of life, something to be endured rather than stopped. Marcus found himself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of his new bedroom and thinking about his old school, his old friends, the dojo where he'd trained since childhood. He thought about his sensei, Master Kim, who had always taught him that martial arts was about discipline and control, not about beating up people who annoyed you. "The strongest fighter is the one who wins without fighting," Master Kim used to say. "Anyone can throw a punch. It takes real strength to walk away." But walking away was getting harder every day. Marcus could feel something building inside him, a pressure that grew a little stronger each time Derek shoved him, each time Tyler laughed at his expense, each time Brad deliberately stepped on his feet in the lunch line. His hands would clench involuntarily during these encounters, his body shifting into defensive postures that his tormentors were too ignorant to recognize as warning signs. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon in late October. Marcus was leaving school through the back exit, taking his usual roundabout route to avoid the main crowd, when he found Derek, Brad, and Tyler waiting for him in the alley behind the gymnasium. They had clearly planned this, positioned themselves where there would be no witnesses, no teachers walking by, no other students to see what happened. "Well, well," Derek said, pushing himself off the brick wall where he'd been leaning. "Look who we have here." Marcus stopped walking, every sense suddenly alert. Something was different about this encounter. The three bullies weren't wearing their usual expressions of casual cruelty. They looked serious, focused, almost businesslike. Derek's right hand was resting inside his jacket pocket, and Marcus's trained eye caught the outline of something long and narrow beneath the fabric. "What do you want, Derek?" Marcus asked, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. "What do I want?" Derek's voice was rising, his face flushing red. "I want you to show me some respect, you little freak. I'm tired of you acting like you're better than me, walking away every time I talk to you." "I'm not acting like anything," Marcus said carefully. "I just want to be left alone." "Well, too bad," Tyler chimed in, his voice higher and more excited than usual. "Because we're done leaving you alone." Brad cracked his knuckles, the sound unnaturally loud in the narrow alley. "Yeah, new kid. Time for you to learn how things work around here." Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but not with fear, with the familiar rush of adrenaline that came before a fight. His body was already shifting into a combat stance without conscious thought, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, hands loose at his sides, but ready to move. Years of training had made these adjustments automatic. "Look, guys," Marcus said, trying one last time to de-escalate. "I don't want any trouble. Can't we just—" "Shut up!" Derek screamed, and suddenly his hand was coming out of his jacket pocket, revealing what Marcus had suspected. A switchblade knife, its steel blade catching the afternoon sunlight. "I am so sick of your voice, sick of your face, sick of you thinking you can just ignore me." The other two boys stepped closer, forming a loose triangle around Marcus. Brad had pulled out a knife of his own, shorter, but just as sharp. Tyler was holding what looked like a box cutter, his hands shaking slightly with excitement or nerves. "We're gonna teach you a lesson you'll never forget," Derek continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "By the time we're done with you, you'll wish you'd never set foot in this school." Marcus felt something cold settle over him, a calm clarity that was more frightening than any rage. This wasn't bullying anymore. This was attempted murder. These three idiots were actually planning to stab him, possibly kill him, over some twisted idea of respect and dominance. "Last chance," Derek said, taking a step forward with the knife held low and ready. "Get on your knees and beg me to forgive you for being such a disrespectful little piece of—" Derek never finished the sentence. Marcus moved. 8 years of martial arts training exploded into action as Marcus's body took over from his mind. Derek lunged forward with the knife, aiming for Marcus's stomach, but Marcus was no longer where he'd been standing. He'd pivoted to the left, caught Derek's wrist with both hands, and used the bigger boy's own momentum to send him spinning into the brick wall. The knife flew from Derek's grip and clattered across the asphalt. Brad rushed in from the right, his own blade sweeping in a wide arc toward Marcus's ribs. Marcus ducked under the swing, grabbed Brad's arm, and executed a perfect hip throw that sent the stocky boy flying through the air to land hard on his back. The wind knocked out of him, and his knife skittering away across the ground. Tyler, seeing his two friends taken down in a matter of seconds, hesitated for just a moment, and that moment was all Marcus needed. He closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, grabbed Tyler's wrist before he could raise the box cutter, and applied a joint lock that forced the smaller boy to drop his weapon with a yelp of pain. The entire encounter had lasted less than 10 seconds. Derek was pulling himself off the wall, blood trickling from where his face had scraped against the brick. Brad was gasping for air, trying to get back to his feet. Tyler was cradling his wrist and staring at Marcus with wide, shocked eyes. "What the hell?" Derek started to say, but Marcus cut him off. "Shut up and listen," Marcus said, and there was something in his voice that made all three boys freeze. Gone was the quiet, nervous kid they'd been tormenting for weeks. This was someone else entirely, someone calm, controlled, and absolutely lethal. Marcus walked over to where Derek's switchblade had fallen and picked it up, closing it with a casual flick of his wrist that spoke of familiarity with weapons. "You just tried to stab me," he said conversationally. "All three of you. With knives. That's attempted murder." "We weren't gonna—" Tyler started to protest, but Marcus's sharp look silenced him. "Yes, you were. You came here with weapons, you cornered me in an alley, and you threatened to kill me. That's what attempted murder means." Marcus pocketed the switchblade and collected the other two knives as well. "Now here's what's going to happen." Derek was back on his feet now, but he was keeping his distance. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. There was something in Marcus's posture, in the way he moved, that screamed danger to anyone with half a brain. "You're going to leave me alone," Marcus continued in that same calm, reasonable tone. "All three of you. You're not going to talk to me, look at me, or acknowledge my existence in any way. You're going to pretend I don't exist." "You can't tell us what to do," Derek said, but his voice was shaky and uncertain. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "Can't I? Derek, I just disarmed all three of you in about 5 seconds. I could have broken your arm when you tried to stab me. I could have snapped Tyler's wrist instead of just making him drop his weapon. I could have thrown Brad hard enough to crack his skull instead of just knocking the wind out of him. Do you understand what that means?" The three boys stared at him, slowly beginning to comprehend just how badly they had misjudged their target. "It means I've been holding back," Marcus said softly. "It means every time you shoved me in the hallway, every time you knocked my books out of my hands, every time you made me feel small and weak and helpless, I could have ended it right then and there. I chose not to. I chose to walk away. I chose to be the bigger person." He took a step toward Derek, who instinctively backed away. "But you just pulled knives on me. You just tried to kill me. That changes things." Marcus's voice was getting quieter, more dangerous. "So here's your choice. You can leave me alone and pretend this never happened, or you can keep pushing me and find out exactly what I'm capable of when I stop holding back." Brad had finally caught his breath and was sitting up, looking dazed. "Dude, where did you learn to fight like that?" "I've been training since I was 8, Marcus said simply. "Karate, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, weapons training. My father thought it would be good for me to know how to defend myself. Turns out he was right." Tyler was still holding his wrist, his face pale. "You could have killed us." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "I could have, very easily. And if you ever come at me with weapons again, I might. Self-defense laws are pretty clear about what you can do to someone who's trying to stab you." Derek's face was cycling through various emotions: shock, fear, anger, and what might have been respect. "Why didn't you fight back before? All those times we messed with you, you just took it. Why?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Because I was raised to believe that violence should be a last resort. Because I thought maybe you'd get bored and move on to someone else. Because I hoped I could get through high school without having to hurt anyone." He shrugged. "But mostly because my father taught me that a real warrior only fights when he has no choice." "And now," Derek asked quietly, "now you've shown me that you're willing to use deadly weapons on someone you think is helpless. That tells me you're not just bullies. You're dangerous. And dangerous people sometimes need to be stopped before they hurt someone who can't defend themselves." The implications of this hung in the air between them. Marcus wasn't just talking about himself anymore. He was talking about every other kid these three had terrorized, every future victim who might not have 8 years of martial arts training to fall back on. "So what happens now?" Brad asked, finally getting back to his feet. Marcus pulled out his phone and held it up so they could see the screen. "Now I'm going to delete the video I just recorded of you three pulling knives on me. I'm going to throw these weapons in a dumpster where no one will find them, and we're all going to go home and pretend this never happened." "You recorded us," Tyler's voice cracked. "Insurance," Marcus said simply, "in case you decided to go to the police with some story about how the new kid attacked you for no reason. But like I said, I'm deleting it. Right now. Watch." He held up the phone so they could see him delete the video file. "There. Gone. This stays between us." Derek was studying Marcus with new eyes, seeing him clearly for the first time. "You're not what we thought you were." "No," Marcus agreed. "I'm not. The question is, are you going to learn from this, or are you going to make me prove my point again?" The three boys exchanged glances, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Finally, Derek nodded slowly. "We'll leave you alone," he said quietly. "But this doesn't mean we're friends or anything." "I don't want to be your friend," Marcus replied honestly. "I just want to finish high school in peace. That's all I've ever wanted." As the three former bullies walked away, Derek helping Brad, who was still moving stiffly from his hard landing, Marcus felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief was the strongest, followed by a kind of exhausted satisfaction. He'd finally stood up for himself, finally shown them that their victims weren't always as helpless as they appeared. But there was something else too, something that worried him. A part of him had enjoyed it. A small, dark part of his mind had relished the look of shock and fear in their eyes when they realized how outmatched they were. That part had wanted to hurt them worse, to make them pay for weeks of humiliation and fear. Marcus shook his head, forcing those thoughts away. He'd done what he had to do, nothing more. He'd defended himself and made sure they wouldn't try this again. That was enough. The next Monday, everything changed at Westfield High School. Word had somehow gotten out, not about the knives or the fight, but about the fact that Derek Thompson and his crew were suddenly giving Marcus Rivera a very wide berth. Students noticed that Derek no longer made comments when Marcus walked by. They saw that Brad didn't accidentally bump into him in the hallways anymore. They watched Tyler practically hide behind his locker when Marcus appeared in his peripheral vision. The change in dynamics was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who paid attention to the school's social hierarchy. Derek was still the captain of the wrestling team, still popular with his established circle of friends, but his aura of untouchable dominance had been cracked. Other students began to notice that the new kid wasn't such an easy target after all. Marcus found himself the subject of curious looks and whispered conversations. A few students even approached him directly, though he kept these interactions brief and polite. He had no interest in becoming the new alpha or replacing Derek as the school's dominant personality. He just wanted to blend in and be left alone. The teachers noticed the change too, though they didn't understand what had caused it. Mrs. Peterson commented to another teacher that things seemed calmer in the hallways lately. Mr. Walsh noted that Derek seemed less disruptive in history class. The gym teacher, Coach Morrison, observed that Derek had stopped targeting other students during basketball games. Marcus continued his policy of keeping his head down and focusing on his studies, but now he could do so without constantly looking over his shoulder. He started eating lunch in the cafeteria again, choosing different tables, but no longer feeling the need to hide in the library. He took direct routes to his classes instead of the roundabout paths he'd been using to avoid confrontation. 3 weeks after the incident in the alley, Derek Thompson did something that surprised everyone who witnessed it. Marcus was at his locker after school, gathering his books for the weekend, when Derek appeared beside him. There were other students around, but not many. Most had already left for the day. "Hey," Derek said quietly. Marcus looked up, instantly alert but not defensive. Derek's body language was different from their previous encounters. No aggressive posturing, no backup from Brad and Tyler, no signs of impending violence. "Hey," Marcus replied carefully. Derek was quiet for a moment, seeming to struggle with something. Finally, he spoke again, his voice so low that Marcus had to lean in to hear him. "My little brother's getting picked on at the middle school," Derek said. "Kid named Josh Martinez. He's smaller than Jake, comes from a rough family, been pushing my brother around for weeks." Marcus closed his locker and turned to face Derek fully. And I was thinking about going over there and beating the crap out of him, show him what it feels like to get picked on by someone bigger." Derek's jaw was clenched, his hands balled into fists. "But then I kept thinking about what you said, about dangerous people needing to be stopped before they hurt someone who can't defend themselves." Marcus waited, sensing there was more. "My brother's not like you," Derek continued. "He doesn't know how to fight. He's just a scared kid who doesn't understand why someone wants to hurt him. And I realized that's what you were before. Just a scared kid who didn't understand why we wanted to hurt you." The admission hung in the air between them. Derek's face was flushed, whether from embarrassment or anger at himself, Marcus couldn't tell. "So, what are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "I don't know," Derek admitted. "I can't teach my brother to fight like you can fight, but I can't just let this Josh kid keep terrorizing him either." Marcus considered this for a moment. "Have you talked to your brother about it? Asked him what he wants you to do?" Derek looked surprised by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe he doesn't want his big brother fighting his battles for him. Maybe he wants to handle it himself. Or maybe he wants to try talking to a teacher first. Or maybe there's something else going on that you don't know about." Marcus shrugged. "When you guys were picking on me, I never asked anyone for help because I thought I could handle it myself. Maybe your brother feels the same way." "But what if he can't handle it? What if this Josh kid really hurts him?" "Then you step in," Marcus said simply. "But let him try first. Give him the chance to solve his own problems. If he can't, then you'll be there." Derek nodded slowly, seeming to think this over. "That makes sense, I guess." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two former enemies having something approaching a normal conversation. "Can I ask you something?" Derek said finally. "Sure." "That day in the alley, you really could have killed us, couldn't you?" Marcus met his eyes. "Yes, but you didn't. Even after everything we put you through, you didn't really hurt us. Why?" Marcus thought about his father's lessons, his sensei's teachings, the long hours of training that had been as much about discipline and control as about fighting techniques. "Because the point isn't to hurt people," he said finally. "The point is to stop them from hurting others. Sometimes that requires violence, but only as much as necessary. You three learned your lesson without me having to put any of you in the hospital. That was enough." Derek extended his hand. "I owe you an apology for everything. The bullying, the harassment, the knives, all of it. It was wrong." Marcus looked at the offered hand for a moment, then shook it. "Apology accepted." "Does this mean we're friends now?" Derek asked with a slight smile. Marcus returned the smile. "Let's start with not being enemies and see how it goes." As Derek walked away, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since starting at Westfield High School: hope. Maybe things really could change. Maybe people could learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves. Over the following weeks, the changes at Westfield continued to ripple outward. Derek's transformation didn't go unnoticed by other students, especially those who had been targets of his bullying in the past. A few even approached Marcus to thank him. though he always deflected the credit. "I didn't do anything special," he would tell them. "I just stood up for myself when I had to." But Marcus knew it was more than that. By refusing to become a bully himself, by showing mercy when he could have shown cruelty, he had demonstrated something important, that strength without wisdom was just another form of weakness, and that true power came from knowing when not to use it. The quiet kid who had just wanted to blend in had inadvertently become something more, a reminder that everyone deserved to be treated with basic human dignity, and that sometimes the most unlikely people were capable of extraordinary things when pushed too far. Marcus Rivera never became the most popular kid at Westfield High School, and he never wanted to be. But he did become something more valuable. He became respected, and in the end, that was enough.